how we can understand the role of the media, because obviously we censored most of the Russian media, but also in this, across the West, there's no discussion about the background of the conflict. There's no discussion about how to end the conflict, and as you pointed out as well, it's already proven that a lot of NATO countries sabotaged the Minsk agreement for 7 years, and after Russia invaded, the Israelis attempted to negotiate, as you said, and they've already confirmed that the West essentially sabotaged this and prevented it. And then the Turks were gonna negotiate a peace, and now the foreign minister of Turkey has also said that the West sabotaged it because they wanted to fight Russia some more. But these are now, in my opinion, established facts. Yet how can we explain the Western media coverage? Because these facts never occur in the media. Instead, we're always told this was unprovoked, and we only want to help Ukraine by giving it weapons. As an expert on propaganda, do you see this as a propaganda, or is it something else?
That term unprovoked is quite interesting. If you do, the term unprovoked aggression has never been used in the past, almost never. In the case of Ukraine, every reference to the Russian invasion has to be called the unprovoked Russian invasion. Take a look, do a Google search for unprovoked invasion. You get a couple of million hits for unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Try to find unprovoked invasion of Iraq. Maybe 10 people who wrote a letter to the Washington Post sometime. In fact, it's never been used before. And any psychologist can explain exactly what's going on. The reason for insisting on calling it the unprovoked invasion is you know perfectly well that it was provoked. In fact, there are extensive provocations going back to the 1990s. As I said, that's not my opinion. It's the opinion of almost the whole top level of the US diplomatic echelon. Anybody with eyes open can see it. And it's hawks, doves, everyone who knows anything about it. Of course, it was provoked. Provoked doesn't mean justified. That's separate, but it's obviously provoked. On the other hand, the US invasion of Iraq, which was much worse than the Russian invasion of Ukraine, though you're not allowed to say that, it was completely unprovoked. There was no provocation for the US-British invasion of Iraq. There's plenty of provocation for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They are both cases of criminal aggression. That's independent of the provocation. But it's very interesting, tells you a lot about propaganda, to see the way the phrase unprovoked invasion has become not only popular, but almost essential in the last year or two. You have to call it that, even though everyone knows it's total nonsense. It's a way of trying to emphasize, try to get people not to pay attention to what's obvious. In fact, the propaganda on this is quite sophisticated. Let's take another example. Take the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline. It was immediately blamed on the Russians, which is almost inconceivable. Why on earth should the Russians sabotage their own major capital investment? And for what possible purpose? If they wanted to stop gas from flowing to Europe, all they have to do is turn a lever. They don't have to destroy their main capital investment. So the idea was crazy in the first place. If you ask which country had the capability and the motivation to destroy the pipeline, it's immediately obvious. The United States. It wasn't a secret even. They kept saying, we have to stop this pipeline. President Biden said, we're going to prevent it. Nobody else, maybe Poland working for the United States, but nobody else had. But you just cannot say this. And it's interesting the way it's handled. I wrote an article about it recently. There was a spate of articles in the press a couple of weeks ago saying there's now some skepticism about whether Russia sabotaged the pipeline. That's brilliant propaganda. The idea that Russia sabotaged the pipeline is outlandish, but we now establish the assumption, the presupposition that Russia was responsible, not us. We don't even talk about that. But to show how free and open we are, we even allow some skepticism about this idiotic idea. That's sophisticated propaganda, not trivial. I presume that most of the world is laughing and ridicule about this, because who else could have sabotaged the pipeline, you know? But it's a very impressive propaganda exercise. Let's put the blame on the Russians. It's a technique that's sometimes called the thief-thief technique. If you're caught with your hand in somebody's pocket, don't deny that a robbery is taking place because it's too obvious. Point somewhere else and say, thief, thief, and maybe everybody will run over there and not notice that you have your hand in his pocket. It's a pretty standard propaganda technique, and it's being used very brilliantly now, as in the case I just mentioned. Today, as you may have noticed, Seymour Hersh came out with a long investigation of the sabotage of the pipeline, giving a lot of details about what should have been understood to be obvious in the first place, and most of the world did understand to be obvious. He'll be silenced and vilified, you can be sure of that, but called anti-American, Putin lover, you know, one of the other techniques of demonization. But the point is pretty simple, and I think most of the world understands this very well. Same about the war. Very few countries are willing to participate in the US-British-led campaign. Almost nobody supports the sanctions, except the United States and Britain, and of course Europe, because they follow along, but almost nobody else. India, not Indonesia, not now Brazil, almost nothing in the global south. I should say, if you talk about propaganda, India is an interesting example. You may recall that a couple of months ago, there was a lot of euphoria in the Western press, US, British press, about the idea that India was now separating itself from Russia and criticizing the Russian invasion. It was based on 6 words of Prime Minister Modi in a meeting between him and Putin in Samarkand. The 6 words were something like, war is not the answer, we should move towards peace. Okay, great excitement. India's breaking from Russia. Take 2 minutes on the internet and look up the Indian government official website where you get Modi's speech. It's a love letter to Putin. He starts by saying, war is not the answer, we need peace, but our relations are closer than ever. We're going to work together to lead to a much better world, and on and on. All of that was cut out in the Western commentary. Just the first 6 words falsified. It can't be by accident. This is just moderately sophisticated propaganda, assuming that nobody's going to take the trouble to look up the Indian government website. No journalists, nobody else.